thing about pornography is that it trains men to think only about ejaculation on a sexual level and on a social level. And the thing about women is that women are not only sexual objects. The thing is, women don't seem to get that because they actually want sexual gratification. But they want it strategically at the same time because they know they can't just freely give sexuality in a world that needs survival, in a world that needs strategic survival. So these women go out there, look for the most powerful man that they can ally with, get their sexual gratification, line up with him to get the most resources that she can get so that she doesn't have to live a life of poverty, limitedness for herself and the children that she feels she's not afraid of. She actually wants to see. She actually lines up with the idea of children, especially because sexuality and children are so linked in the female mind. It's difficult to get involved with sexuality and not think that maybe there might be a child. Maybe that's something that I can do with myself. The only problem is all these men are so thirsty for ejaculation, especially when women go into relationships or women go into sexual relations and they're looking to make the man ejaculate as a strategic maneuver to get him to basically be addicted to her visual imagery. The image of her, the sound of her, it's a manipulative procedure so that a woman can get what she wants. It's not that women are better than men. It's just that men are a little bit easier to control when you could manipulate them basically through their ejaculation. But then this creates this class of men that are basically ejaculation machines who are addicted to or ejaculation addicts. So they need their ejaculation. They think in terms of ejaculation. They actually see women as ejaculations. So the manipulations that women have used through knowing what they were doing and not knowing what they were doing, so conscious and unconsciously participating in only thing that they do, they're actually creating their own downfall. They're actually creating their own. They think that they're being slick about it, and they might get away with it for a little while, but over time, all that backlash is going to hit when the men wake up and realize they've been tricked. That it's actually not that important to them, that they're actually bigger than the ejaculation, that they're actually bigger than this kind of a woman. Despite her children or despite her need to feel survival or need to feel nervousness, despite her emotional outbursts, despite all of that, doesn't even matter. Because he'll inevitably feel like the manipulations put in place to control his mind or to control his reactive self, they're fickle and they can fall away and they're not important anymore. And what's more important is the internal management of his energy for his internal strength for a world that's much broader, much greater than any small struggles that they may have originally met in. And the redistribution of his internal state of mind and the resources of his mind so that he regains his inspirational life. He regains his internal energy, his internal flow for himself, which isn't sexual. It has a sexual component, which is mostly like a stimulative component. Just like a woman, she has a sexual component that's not related to children. It's just a stimulative component. If those two people would like to make children, if they would like to procreate, that's another option. So there's the stimulative component in the man, which may have been mistaken for a sexual addiction or an ejaculatory addiction. And because of that addiction, he's always looking for another hit. He's always being false in himself. He's never being honest in himself that he doesn't know what he cares about. He doesn't want to answer those questions. He'd rather be in silence. He'd rather, but he doesn't, because he's afraid of whatever, maybe the way she'll react, or that her thoughts are actually different than his thoughts, or that her needs are different than his needs, or the realization that she actually might not understand his needs. And how do you handle that when single-mindedness is the name of the game? And anything other than that is violence, verbal or physical, emotional violence. It's touchy. So all of that comes from this sexual ejaculatory addiction in a man, created by women that may not understand that ejaculation isn't the go-to emotion. But the thing is, these women need to survive. So it's sort of like, who started it? You know, like, did men make women survive and women had to do what they had to do? Or did women manipulate men because whatever, who knows? I mean, we're coming out of patriarchal times, so I hate to point the finger at a man, considering that I am a man. I hate to make it seem so male-oriented. Right? Women, man, pimped out woman. Which sucks. Because she could be so freely sexual and so free in a community. Like, exalted woman is just such a... That divine femininity is so sacred to have free and supported and openly loved, so that the sexual knowledge is free and supported and open to know, and she doesn't have to use men, and man gets that knowledge, and it doesn't, and sexuality isn't such a game of manipulation. I mean, and confidence comes much more naturally to people simply because everybody's a little bit happier, everybody's a little bit more supported. Nobody's hustling to survive. It's like you could just go get a car, go into the woods. Doesn't cost you anything. Just the whole society supports choice rather than don't you think outside the box or else everyone will hate you. Don't you step outside those bounds or else everything will come crashing down on you. Don't you dare think that you don't need what you think you need. Don't you dare think those kinds of thoughts. So once woman is supported, this whole communal support system for an exalted masculine can develop instead of a manipulated masculine, instead of a perceived masculine which is basically empty. I mean, how can women really respect man when woman only sees a false man, when she only sees a false man, when she only sees this man that is petty and childish and not understanding of his own self and not understanding of primordial principles of the universe, when man represents the unknown, right? Man represents the infinite. Man represents heaven, and woman represents earth. And when they come together, boom, you have heaven on earth, where man can say, honey, this is the primordial essence of the universe. And she goes, so what are we going to do about it? And they smile and laugh about it together. And they do something about it on earth. And they make it for their children. And they're all supported by their community. But when woman has to survive and man doesn't understand what he's done, and man is confused in his internal chemistry because of false addictions, and he's using others around him for emotional manipulation, and he doesn't understand what he's doing. His will is being drained in directions, and much of it is just like this pornography ejaculatory addiction, where everybody is seen as every male is seen as a comrade or an enemy for battle or for sort of like depression or solitude, whatever. It just turns into this, and every female is seen as an ejaculatory response to get to. So you have to abuse her. You have to use her to get to this ejaculatory response. And it's sort of like, what man has the most patience to trick a woman? And then when he even gets to it, if he had the patience, her sexuality, her knowledge might be based on pornography. And her knowledge might be based on ejaculation as the way to please a man. When ejaculation is what drains a man of his energy. I mean, it literally that has life force in it. It has, I mean, if a man is conscious, then he could take an ejaculation or two and it wouldn't hurt him. But if a man is unconscious of his state of being and is totally driven by an ejaculatory confusion, then he will abuse her emotionally because he doesn't understand his own emotional set points. He doesn't understand why he's doing what he's doing. He actually doesn't have the capacity to be a friend. He, not to say that the potential isn't there, but deceit and manipulation have to be expected. And emotional dishonesty has to be expected. Simply because he is an emotional dishonesty has to be expected. So how do we change this? Really, truly, the only way to change it is for men to stop ejaculating so much. Because women are not only sexual objects. Because a man that's good with women doesn't see women as only sexual objects. He sees them as intellectual beings that are also very sexual. And that's really a woman's come up, is to regain her intellectual status. Woman is more than just a sexual being, a sexual object. In the past, that used to fly, but not anymore. She's on her come up. So, man has to be actually quite responsible. He actually has to be understanding that if he gets into an ejaculatory addiction, state of mind, then he's literally going to be moving for an ejaculatory addiction. He's going to be moving in his actions and his thoughts toward it, infiltrated from within. So he has to slow wean himself off of needing it. And that's how women sort of get man. Blowjobs, hand jobs, coming. It's all just terms for ejaculate, 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 ejaculate. Baby, please ejaculate. Baby, please ejaculate. Because it all represents control. So man has to be a bit more conscious in himself because he's not going to find it in women. Women doesn't understand, even though women are definitely passionate, but she doesn't lose energy in her sexuality. She absorbs it and gets more into it, gets more excited. She actually becomes like a sponge of energy. When man is more like something that depletes energy. Man is like a force of that actually, especially when he's building with a woman who's gaining energy and he begins to lose energy, even if just for a moment, then it creates this combative disconnection. He looks at her like, who are you and why am I here? It's sort of like it drains him of it drains him of empathy. It drains him of his connection he had in the moment. First it might have actually been an intellectual connection. But there was that hidden ejaculatory drive. Then it became a passionate ejaculatory desire, passionate in him. So he's on top of you, just firing away, combined with that intellectual feeling that had maybe over a few dates. You're like, all right, cool, we're in it. And then finally, you give him, you weaned him into it. You're doing it right, and then all of a sudden, after he dies down a little bit, he jerks off. You finally, and then you console him and you let him know he did great and he's the best and thank you and all that. But the truth is, none of that is it. The truth is he is already a little bit gone because he's laying next to you and he's a bit more tired than he was before. Even if he is one of the good ones and he's more optimistic and he's like, just give me a few minutes, da, da, da. He's a bit gone. And he's realizing his internal discrepancies, he's realizing those internal what's that word he's realizing his internal fickle thoughts, whatever, once a wavering, whatever. He's realizing that whole internal stuff, that internal struggle inside of himself that he falsifies for a woman, and he feels gypped because it's such a small gain for him. Even when he's grown up and he's adult about it, it just seems like she gains so much more than he gains, because she absorbs energy and she gets a family and she gets children and she gets a male representative in her life to make her feel even more complete, who represents all these values, like a friend and a protector and a provider for her. And a male set of knowledge available to her, and somebody that's going to flatter her whenever she feels any kind of way. And somebody that's going to help her heart rest in peace when she feels a bit down and out. Somebody that can come and console her and make her feel peace inside. Potentially somebody who can offer her guidance for her life. Somebody that can actually support her. So it's this huge play. It's this huge trade that man makes just for an ejaculation, either now or later. So for man to feel like his internal desires, his internal... I mean, women naturally gets what she wants just because she's a sponge of energy. She's a sponge for the whole thing. So for man to feel unrepresented, misunderstood, emotionally misunderstood, emotionally empty, it becomes like this game of anger and vengeance, because she gets so much and he still doesn't understand why he feels empty at the end of the day. And yet he's still moving on such a low, petty, ejaculatory stance that it kills him when he finally gets it. It kills him that she moves to give it to him, that she actually uses it consciously or unconsciously to get what she needs. She preys on it because it's built into her mechanisms of thought, processes of thought, trains of thought, looking for it naturally. I mean, he gives her a sense of purpose. He gives her this sense of sexual pleasure, purpose and pleasure. He gives her this fulfillment. I mean, he gives her something to be like a pussycat, something to prey on. He gives her a target so that she can actually go out there and attack it. She can actually go out there and make that man her sexual object. But if she's killing him, if she's draining him, and she doesn't know what she's doing. So really, the downfall of the divine feminine, the repression of the divine feminine, was actually the repression of the divine masculine. Because no masculine in his right mind would ever do that to the feminine. No masculine who was ever sane and understanding would ever do that. It's impossible because they know themselves so well as divine guides, as divine masters. Why would you ever? You represent so much for her and she for you. In existence itself. I mean, profound existence. And they represent qualities of infinity on earth. Infinity within finity. Infinity existing as finity. I mean, it's like heaven on earth. So to say that, so for that's why it's such a huge transaction for man. It's such a huge trade, and man can feel gypped because he's basically stupid. He's the fallen man, the fallen male principle. The divine man is actually much more in line with his divine principles of his state of being for his needs. See, woman has needs that she attracts to her and is naturally in tune with, naturally resonant with. She bends to things. She manipulates underneath the linear mind of man. When man thinks like that, she just takes it. She can bend with it. She's like a water bender. She could take it and boom, 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 and maybe later she could do it. And when he's not looking, and maybe she can use her sexuality to transition his state of mind, or maybe she can da-da-da-da. So woman is like this manipulative sort of force. The divine man, though, once he's lost, he sort of gets lost in this linear train of thought that has to just die. It just, like, woman will curve her way back into her, what did I call it before? She'll curve herself back into her risen self. She'll just bend her way there over time, and she might get hurt, and it might be painful, and she might cry, and she may never understand what happened. A lot of the times, what's happening, but at the end of the day, she's still gonna bend and curve her way there. But man, he's like a stick pointing forward. Like if it's like it can't bend too much or it'll just snap. So man is like extremely rigid. So man in this transaction feels extremely abused because all he gets out of it is ejaculation, because the society actually doesn't support the divine masculine. So his needs, which are much more I mean, woman will bend and curve her way to create her needs. She'll do whatever. She might not, it might not be the way she expected 10 years prior, but she'll get it and she'll make it happen. And she'll still be wholesome about it and she'll keep her integrity and she'll get it. But man, he's like, I mean, man, he's like, man doesn't know how to magnetize like a woman does. Because woman can actually bend the forces around her. And the forces naturally bend with her. So it's actually pretty fun being a woman because you could actually bend forces. It could be confusing. I'm not going to say it's not, but it could be very fun because you're naturally magnetizing forces. There's naturally this set of resources for a woman to interplay, and she could consciously go into that and get better at it and be more of a conscious transformer of these natural forces. And she can actually begin to mold life with integrity and with high intent and with a lot of heart and really with a lot of herself. And as she does that, it's like a snowball that just keeps picking up and picking up and picking up. And she knows her needs because they're natural to her. And she knows what she wants because she doesn't fight it. She just wants it. And how is she going to get it? Sometimes you got to get a man. Sometimes you need a good man by your side. Sometimes if you see a good man, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. I'm going for it. How do I get him? Get him to ejaculate. Or build with him first. Become his friend. Oh, he's like a shallow one. He doesn't. And then it just becomes that game that she can get what she wants magnetically. But when man put down woman, in from why ever that happened, I don't know. But somehow there was that cause and effect. And now man puts down woman, and he's stupid enough to do that to his own society. Somehow he got an ego trip. A real big ego trip. To the point where not only was he king, but he made his queen nothing. He valued her at zero. And for man to be that stupid to value his queen at zero is a man who is totally unconscious, which means he might even be below zero because man can't magnetize as easily as a woman can. So man feels gypped in his deal. Man feels gypped because he doesn't know his own needs. And he feels childish and immature because he doesn't know what he wants. And when he sees himself, he feels even more childish and immature because he realizes he's been childish and immature. And he realizes that the ones he's been learning from have been childish and immature. And he realizes that his destiny has to be learned because something happened here. Because something happened here. And in the most cases, or in a lot of cases, I could say that, it's a game of survival. It's simply that. That's the story. It's just survival. So it's this sort of like ejaculatory depression game where man is just low and it becomes this game of feeling even like angry at woman because you want her to feel just as you want her to not be the sponge, to not be the magnetism. You almost feel angry, and it's natural because the society doesn't support it. So all man can do is feel like even once he understands it, well, I guess that's not true. If he understood it, he wouldn't be so angry. But if he begins to get a taste for that feeling of unbalanced, imbalance, it's not a fair transaction. He's gonna start to feel angry. He's gonna get angry because she gets more emotional, more security. She gets more satisfaction, more gratification. She's been more emotionally balancing for her and her friends when he's been more combative and more distant. She's a more emotionally open individual when he's been more emotionally closed down, and he could call that manliness, but he also feels deep down that he really does want to be emotionally expressive. She gets family and friends, she gets children and a Prince Charming to call her own, and she expects these things. She expects them, and man doesn't even understand that she expects it. He watches that expectation, and he goes, how the fuck can she just expect that? And that's the emotional game that she's playing. It's this game of bending the forces along with a natural attunement to her needs in the form of emotional fixation and expectation, along with her manipulative tactics to get what she needs as she bends all these forces and uses man and sucks on a penis, puts it inside of her, rides it, looks him in the eyes. I mean, literally, this game she's playing of just like being entrenched in the forces of life, giving birth to a child out from inside of her body. I mean, it's like truly profound. It's truly a mind blow. Even though it's like the most ancient of things, it's like still you could just look at it and say, man, that really is something special, something to that. At least it is. So it's cool to think about. When a man, so the divine feminine is naturally gonna bend its way back, even if it's been forgotten. The divine masculine, not so much. It'll just kill itself. It'll kill each other. It'll hate and be petty and angry because anger is the only emotion allowed. Is suppression of all the other warmer emotions. So the only thing left is cold bitterness and hidden frustration and all of these like vindictive, angry qualities. A man's gonna go through that part and depression and just like non-expression and 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 that ejaculatory desire. So it's gonna be that low expression of his kinship to woman and his kinship to his humanity. And that's gonna be his basically his main motivator is his basically life living through his penis as an ejaculatory mechanism. And that's going to drain him because it's going to be this sort of like low focus. When he could be using his mind, he's going to be using his penis. And it's just, he's going to feel so chipped. It's going to hurt him so much. It's going to hurt him so much. So woman naturally magnetizes her risen self. Man does it too because we all create, but man's gonna do it in a much angrier, in a much more repressed way, and he might not even know it's gonna be really woman that's gonna help to restore him because she's gonna open his heart again. And then he'll feel it, and then he'll say, oh, this is what I was resisting for so long. And all of that emotional confusion and repression and low emotions and resistance and unwillingness, and all my friends who were going through it too, or the people that I called my friends, and I didn't know how to be there for them because they were going through the same thing, and nobody really knew how to help each other out, and none of us knew what we were wanting, and none of us really knew what it even means to be a man. And it's not just about being a father. It's actually literally a principle, divine masculine principle. I mean, the divine birther, the divine feminine principle. This divine masculine principle, it represents something. And that was lost. So it felt very low. And it felt very hunt or die. Either hunt and be cold because you can't be warm and affectionate on a hunt. You're out there to kill. Or die. Bottle up, close up, and just go kill yourself somewhere. And die. Finish it off. Go somewhere and never come back. It's over. There's no emotional in between. For men to come together and be emotional together, oh, that's something. It's touchy. It's definitely touchy. But that nurturing, which he eventually finds in a woman, which he could have found in himself, but eventually he'll find in a woman, that is like that pleasant area that he could use so that he can actually begin to open his hearts to more women without just being from a penis standpoint. And of course the media doesn't help man to feel more like a divine being. The media wants man to feel basically like a sexual being, to just devour, to hunt, to live from your penis, to live literally serving your penis. I mean, it's one thing to be a powerfully intellectual man and to have a penis on that body. A powerfully intellectual man with an open heart and a smile for the world, who also happens to have a penis. But to be a man who lives from his penis in a emotional confusion, and his mind and his will are being disrupted and molded to serve that desire. His will is being cut off. His will is actually being taken and rechanneled into these other thoughts so that it could serve that desire as himself. And a woman has to look that in the eyes and think about how to value that. That's pretty something. So, that sexual monster in a man, which could be reflected in a woman, that's when it gets crazy. Because it's like, who is really it becomes like this sexual high that could be created between man and woman. But that's another topic. Because really, that being who happens to also have a penis with that high intellectual mind, with that open heart and a smile for the world, I mean, that's really where man resides. He is representative of the intellectual self, because he is not the birther of humanity. He's the protector. He is the one who keepsakes. He's the keeper for the sacredness. He is really legitimately the disconnection which holds down the sacredness. So in a way, he still is the hunter. In a way, he still is, because those things are natural to him. So you can see them still show up. But when the divine aspects are taken away, then the low hunter is just this like sexual hunter. It's just this sort of like hunt for survival or a hunt for sex, and that's it. When the divine aspect is added back in, he's the hunter of the divine. He is the protector of the divine. He's the keeper of the divine. He's actually the decoder of the mysteries. He's the self-sacrificial protector that can actually be a guide for the entire community. He's the shaman. He's the healer for the community. There's all these, it just keeps going, because his actualization is not in just getting an ejaculation. Having a partner is so easy for a man if he was in a sane community, because there's so many good people, so many good bodies, so many good minds. If the community was sane, it wouldn't be this jealous community, reality TV, and and materialism as the way to judge status. I mean, in a sane community, man would be simply exalted because he is, and what he represents is massive. He's not something to just use, even if he used you first. So, what happened was a forgetting of the divine principles. That woman is a magnetic being. She's not just a sexual object. That woman is a magnetic being, an intellectual being, who can attract all of her desires and needs from just her natural state of being in attunement with who she is. Naturally. And she has a heart for the world. But that divine masculine may have been lost along the way, which makes her job a little bit more emotionally tumultuous, a little bit more emotionally confusing, and thus her mind tries to rationalize it in defense, or it just becomes more erratic, and she doesn't know why, because woman is more attuned to her emotional needs and her body's needs more than rationalizing her mind. So her mind will literally be a product of the emotional dysfunction of the community. But her heart will be alright. I mean, she'll still get there because she's still in attunement. But her emotional mind is going to be a bit unstable. And that's what confuses men so much, because not only that, but once the society has been hurt, now man has been lost as well. So woman will bring man home, but man might feel a little bit, so now the divine masculine is lost, and he might feel a little bit lost to his own personal identity. So there's men all around in this world who are just seeming depressed and lost and quiet and isolationists, and they don't seem to be excited about life, and society seems to just use them and not actually support and give them any sense of accomplishment or any sense of or any sense of um, communal love, really. Any sense of brotherhood or family. It's just this sort of battle for man, where women can look each other in the eyes and just sort of feel comfortable. Men seem a bit more, or women could be a bit more warm with each other. Men tend to be a bit more cold. So it's a rising of that. So how do we really turn it? So I think that man has to be able to be friends with intellectual friends with women instead of manipulating women. But not to the point where you become abused by women, but possibly, it's a tough call, exactly. It's more like man has to not be so much on the sexual hunt. He actually has to, he actually has to be a powerful intellectual being whose aim is really not sexual, whose aim, at the minimum, is not ejaculatory. He has to actually absorb some of the energy like women do naturally. And he can't, because the divine man has been so drained and so primordially lost in purpose and definition that woman's rise is really not the only thing happening. Woman's rise is definitely important, but somebody's got to hold down man. And woman can't hold down man in that way. Woman holds down man, but if he doesn't know himself, she can't do that work for him. She can assist him, she can help him, she can be there for him, and she can let him know that she'll always be there for him. But if man doesn't know it himself, then or doesn't have a desire and the intent and the willingness, the consistent willingness at all times to be that, because he doesn't know, or maybe, oh yeah, because he doesn't know. He's not aware to it yet. But once he's aware and he's willing to hold that down, then he becomes this, he goes from being one who's depleted all the time, low, and he transitions it to becoming an absorber and high. One who's from depletion and emptiness and disconnection and coldness to a hunter for the divine, where he becomes a representative of the divine. He becomes not just a father, but literally a representative of the cosmos. He becomes the smile of God. I mean, it's not about just survival and protection. It really becomes a divine purpose in him. I mean, something that isn't necessarily emotional. It's something that's just massive. I mean, that's why so many men feel lost intellectually, because they don't have that They haven't organized the conscious knowledge to give a framework for all the knowledge so that this piece goes here and this piece goes here. They might just be caught up in one little piece over there because they don't know what the puzzle looks like. They don't have the picture. So to get involved with men is really to get involved with the confusion of the divine masculine, or the or the loss in this world where there is no divine masculine, where women abuse men. Women get men hooked on drugs. Which is weird because women get men hooked on a drug that actually depletes their life force, or depletes their vitality at the very least. What a crazy drug. What a manipulative feminine drug, huh? Some backhanded shit. Some shit that you want that just hurts you. Some shit that you really want that just depletes you in the end. And it wasn't really worth it. It was a low desire. It was beneath what you could have been. And because you partook in it, it's that even that depletes you, because you have to reconcile all the thoughts, all the things that got you there, all this energy that was like this whole process of energy where you could have been applying yourself on this powerfully intellectual state of mind. The woman that was a part of it, her emotional states, just why it happened, what's going on, and then finally, I mean, so it's like that intellectual state of mind could have been what could have been, but it wasn't. It was something else. It was this low ejaculatory desire created from an unconscious man and created from a woman who doesn't know, who's just going about her survival to get what she needs, to maybe have a little bit of fun in the meantime, to maybe put her heart out there. Maybe she'll get hurt, maybe she won't, but she's willing, and it could get dirty, it could get gross, but it is what it is, and that's love. And she doesn't really know why. She doesn't know. It's not her job to know. It's just her job to attract and to resonate with herself and to just do that. So man, it's like, man, I could keep going on and on, because man is he's like the missing element, because woman's balance comes when when man stands up for his integrity, when man stops taking part in these games. And a lot of it has to do, once again, with cultural differences and war and battle, and differences in philosophy about existential existence. So man has to sort of get over that and then come into his own understanding of just simply what the primordial divine masculine is. And then when he's in line with that, then he'll understand that being aligned with his woman only in an ejaculatory and an ejaculatory sense, which creates this emotional addiction and a mental addiction, and he begins to lose himself, is a very low form of a man. And it creates an angry man. Unless they're a very, very harmonious couple. Who seem to have maybe not an intellectual balance, but maybe he is his own inspiration, and that's why they resonate so well. So it's not impossible to have a not angry man or a harmonious couple. But the thing is, that kind of a man he's ejaculatory, and he has a heart for himself and the world, or he has a certain energetic boost to himself, which relates to his own energetic supply for himself. And he probably has an awareness of himself that certain men don't have, that actually fuels him even more. So he can actually see himself as he's been reinforced over all the years of his life. He's been reinforced over his life to actually know what it is that he is and how that relates to femininity and masculinity, so that he actually has a sense of confidence in this world, even though he's ejaculatory. That's why those men are desired. They're powerful men, even if they don't know. They actually are probably more in tune with their feminine nature, simply because they are strong, but they're also very magnetic. Because they're electric, woman is magnetic, but they also know that the heart is really the kind of electricity they like to put out there, the smile and the warmth, not necessarily the manipulation. So to take those low men, go on with that, I mean, that's really, it's dope. It's cool. It's exciting. It really gives hope, because there's so many men that have no idea what's going on here. To get involved with men, to get involved with a woman expects to be understood. A man, not so much. A woman attempts to understand man, but man doesn't understand man. So what does man do? He makes fun of woman and says woman's too much, too emotional, too many questions, can't stop thinking, can't just blah 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 blah. So he attacks woman. So what does woman do? She says you're boring, you suck, you never want to go out, never want to have fun, all these things. And that creates all this dysfunction in relationships, all this anger, and then they have sex, and it's called makeup sex, it's called breakup sex, or it's called we do this on Tuesdays after we meet up. And what happens? He gets an ejaculation. She doesn't. But she likes the guy. She can work with him. Whatever. She'll probably get a kid out of it or something. You know, it looks good for her. It's nice. Blah, 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 blah. So, sexual objects, ejaculation, and that's a powerful man when he's powerfully intellectual and he doesn't need his ejaculation. He uses techniques. He strengthens his body. He knows how to rechannel his semen throughout his own body. He knows how to he knows the constitution of his own energy. He knows his primordial masculine, his divine masculine. He knows what it represents. He respects himself. He respects his time and his attention. He expects others to want the same thing. So he's patient with them, but his intent is for understanding. His intent is for understanding and balance. Where his mind is resonant with the divine forces. Where a woman's heart and magnetism is resonant with the divine forces. And he's respected despite how much money he has or whatever. It doesn't matter. But for the fact that he has respect for life itself, that he actually respects life itself, that it's like an emptiness in the respect, that it doesn't need, it's like an empty passion. This woman represents that sponge, that fullness, that vitality, that emotional expression, that burst. And man is the same thing, but on the other side, he could be passionately empty. He could be just the stillness of a lake, the silence of a breeze on the beach. So how many women know about, so how many women know, so how many women know about how to bring up the divine masculine, or even the problem that its absence isn't respected, or that it's not respected? How many women know that the divine masculine isn't uh, acknowledged? And that's the problem. Not that their needs aren't important and special, but that the gateway to have their needs satisfied come through being a conscious sister, a conscious woman, aware that those masculine identity issues, those forgotten masculine principles, are the way to satisfy her needs even more, even greater. Finding mature men, finding mature men who are not low, who've actually transformed their low desire into a powerful intellectual standpoint with an open heart and a smile for the world, where they're not angry and combative. Not that they wouldn't hold down their family in the circumstances, but they're not openly They have a powerful intellectual mind with an open heart and a smile for the world. And they also just happen to have a penis. They're not ejaculatory in nature, in primordial desire anymore. They've transformed all of that into being a resonant force. They can actually be friends with others. They actually have the capacity to be allies with the world because they're not invested in any one individual for manipulative, ejaculatory, emotional controls and mind control tactics and strategic whatevers, and then the woman has to backlash on that with her bullshit, and then he fucking hits her with that other bullshit, and it just keeps going back and forth with this stupidity. It's not that anymore. All that is done. It's so low, and they're so that's so beneath them, and they're so beyond that. It's just like that is some stupid childish bullshit. That is some dumb bullshit. That is some stupidity. That just put that away forever. It's gone. We're done with that. We know what it means to be allied with the world. We know what it means to be open-hearted with the world. We know what it means to be powerfully intellectual. We know what it means to have a smile. We know what it means to be open-hearted. We know what it means to not need to survive, to not need to be so combative and protective. We actually know what it means to be able to relax as men. And we have women that acknowledge that in us. That acknowledge the stillness of man. That acknowledge the resonance of man. That man is linear. That man is straight. But because of that, his back is straight. His spine is straight. Because of that, he resonates with the entire cosmos. You can see it in his eyes. You can see it in the peace and the love of his eyes. Men who are responsible. Men who take responsibility for their actions. That they have made women. That they have made women. That they have attempted to control women's minds. Other beings, other people, other ones whose dispositions might not be as mentally disconnected. So a bit more emotional, a bit more self-sacrificing, a bit more. So taking responsibility for the fact that women have been turned because of a man's actions. Men that take responsibility for that. That a woman has been turned. That an individual has come in one way and left in another. An individual has come in one way and left a bit more vindictive or a bit more manipulative or a bit more angry. Taking responsibility for these things because of actions that one has taken. A man that can take responsibility for who they are, what they've done, why they've done it, Men that are challenging. Men that challenge the system. Men that say, no, this is not the way I'll have it. Challenge it like a woman would challenge it. Men that would challenge it like a woman would challenge it. Men that aren't afraid to challenge it like a woman would challenge it. Men that say, I challenge it. I challenge it. I challenge. Don't try to put race on me. Don't try to put color on me. Don't try to put gender on me. I challenge it because I challenge it. I challenge it because I challenge it. I challenge it because it needs to be challenged. Don't try to put sexuality on me. Don't try to bullshit me. Men that stand up for themselves. Men that stand up for their world. Men that stand up for their world. Men that can understand their world. Men that can understand the forces at play. Men that can understand why women could only give so much without man taking responsibility for his own state of awareness, his own consciousness. Men that understand these things. Men that have understanding. And in that understanding comes strength, comes resilience, comes power, comes mind, comes resonance, comes cosmos, comes strength, comes honor, comes respect, comes dignity, becomes confidence, becomes willingness, becomes self-certainty, it becomes self-knowledge, it becomes self-understanding, it becomes communal understanding, it becomes communal support, it becomes family support, it becomes personal support, it becomes pioneering, it becomes open-heartedness, it becomes openness to the world, it becomes open-hearted intent. It becomes a man making the changes that he knows is within his means and still stretching himself after that. He challenges. He's a natural challenger. A natural challenger. Natural challenger. Even that he can relax. He's a natural. He naturally desires his own he naturally desires his own expansion, even in his relaxation. He naturally gravitates toward this mentally expanded self because he's full of internal support systems, internal strength, internal resiliences. He's not afraid anymore. He's not afraid of death. He's not afraid of whatever's anymore. He's not afraid of the boogeyman anymore. He's just. And because of that, he could stand there with his woman. He could stand there with the woman that sees him. He could stand there because he can see her. And they could see each other. They don't own each other, but they can see each other. They don't own each other, but they can see each other. I can see her. And she's saying, I can see him. I don't own you. I can see you. I don't own you. I can see you. It's so profound. I don't own you. I don't own you. I don't own you sexually. I don't own you. I don't own you mentally. It's a gift to be with you. I don't own you. It's an honor. It's like a privilege. It's a love. It's a passion of mine to continue to be better as myself so that I can continue to be better. So that I can continue to see better. So that I continue to grow. so I can continue to see. It's natural. And I love to relax with you. I love to sit in your heart. I love to lie in your heart. I love to just rest there. 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 I love to lie in your heart. I'd love to. I'd love to. I'd love to. I'd love to just lie in your heart. I'd love to. I don't expect anything from you. I just would love to. I would love to just rest there. I don't expect anything. I don't. I really don't. I don't want anything. I just don't. I just don't. I don't. I just would love to rest there. I just love to rest there. I would just love to rest there. I would just love to rest there. We've put in the time. We've put in the time. We've gotten around the hard parts. I really would love to just rest there. Can we rest together? Can we rest together?